What's up guys, Mizzo Frizzo here, and in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to set up a custom character from scratch, in this case from Mixamo. It's going to be a very easy tutorial to follow, so if you're a beginner in Unreal Engine 5 and you just say finished a beginner's tutorial from Unreal Sensei for example, and you want to take it to the next step, I'm going to show you how to set up a custom character, including setting up an animation blueprint from scratch so you can start animating your character however you like. For example, I've got this old man idle and a bit of an old man walk and a silly run, and my jumping doesn't look perfect because I've kind of edited a mishmash of animations here to make the jumping work, but it is what it is. So without further ado, let me show you how to do this. Alrighty guys, the first thing you're going to want to do is head over to Mixamo and log in if you haven't logged in before. Find the character that you want to use. I'm just going to use David here and hit download. Leave this as FBX binary and in a T-pose and hit download. That download will start, and while we're here let's find some animations. So you can click here, find animations for this character, and let's have a look at what we got here. First of all, we should probably get an idle. We can just search for idle, and I'm just going to grab this one here. That looks fine, just like that. Hit download and make sure you select here without skin. We'll put keyframe reduction to uniform, and I'm just going to leave this at 30 frames per second and hit download. Let's look for some more animations. Let's look for a walk. Whoops. Let's go with this one called walking. The description says male hurried, and we just want to check in place here, so this has root motion enabled. Download, without skin, uniform, 30 frames per second, hit download. Then let's look for a running animation. I'm just going to grab this fast run, description running fast. Make sure in place is checked. Hit download, without skin, uniform, 30 frames per second, and download. Now let's look for some jumping, landing, and falling animations. Now I like this one because he doesn't jump too high, and if you select something like this where he's jumping right up off the ground, you can find this one broken up into sort of 3 different animations, such as this one here jumping up, but he actually jumps up off the ground. So if I look at that one, he jumps quite high off the ground, whereas this one he is kind of jumping back, but if you make it in place you can crop this so it's more like the animation that comes in the third person template. So I'm just going to get this one in place, without skin, uniform, 30 frames per second, and hit download. Next, let's find a falling animation. This one here, falling idle, this one's going to do for me. Download, without skin, uniform, 30 frames per second, hit download. And now let's find a landing animation. This one here looks good. Landing, description, landing from jump. I'm just going to crop this falling part out, so I can just download that one. And that should be all we need for now. Next thing we're going to do, guys, is create a new project using the third person template. Leave everything as default, and I've just called this Mixamo project. Once the editor has fired up, we're going to look for the third person folder and blueprints and open up BP third person character. We're also going to create a new folder in characters for our character. I'm just going to call this one car for character. And in here I'm going to right click and import and find the folder where your downloads have gone to, and I am going to start by importing the character, and I can just hit import all. This might take a few seconds. You might get some errors about smoothing groups. That doesn't matter too much. Here we have all of the materials and our character. That's fine. I can also, in my characters folder, I'm going to right click and create another folder called animations. And in animations, I'm going to right click and hit import, and I'm going to import all of my animations here. Select the skeleton that your character is using, which for me is going to be this one here. Import all, and here we have our animations. Now straight away what we can do is edit a couple of these. I'm going to open the jump animation and hit pause here and look at exactly what I want to get from this animation. So I'm actually going to stop this animation pretty quickly as soon as he's left the ground. So I'm just going to take it to here and right click and remove the rest of the frames from this animation. So it's just going to be a very quick short animation with these first few frames. Hit save, and let's look at the landing animation. I definitely don't want him falling from the sky, because this animation is going to play when my character actually hits the ground. So I'm just going to play it from right here, boom, when he hits the ground. I'm going to right click, remove the frames before that, and then I am also going to tidy this up, shorten it right up by ending it about here. And now that is our landing animation. I am also going to change this to an additive. So I'm going to change this to local space here, an additive anim type, and selected animation scaled. And I'm going to select the animation of him just walking. So if I find the walking animation here, I'm going to set it to this one here. Save and close that. And let's have a quick look at the falling idle. That's absolutely fine the way it is. Alrighty, let's get started with an animation blueprint. So here in animations, I'm going to right click animation and animation blueprint. I'm going to select the skeleton that my character is using, and I'm going to call this animation blueprint underscore character. Open this up, head on over to the event graph, and we're going to look for a node called event blueprint begin play. I'm also going to grab this try get pawn owner, get an is valid, and also off of this try get pawn owner, I'm going to cast to my character, to my third person character, because we're going to use the BP third person character here. We can drag off of as BP third person character, promote this to a variable, call it character reference, something like that. And we can also off of here get character movement, which you might have to scroll down to the bottom here, get character movement, also promote that to a variable, call it character movement, plug this in here. And now we can get our character reference here, and once again get an is valid. Plug this into event blueprint update animation. And on is valid, we're going to make a sequence, add a few pins here. So we got 5 pins maybe. And we are going to start by dragging off of character reference here and get velocity. Might have to scroll down here, get velocity. We can promote that to a variable, call it velocity. plug it into the first pin here. We can also drag off of get velocity and find vector length xy. Promote this to a variable and call it ground speed. And drag off of character reference now and get actor rotation. Off of get actor rotation, you can find calculate direction. It should be the second one that we want here, this one here. Plug the velocity into get velocity. Promote this to a variable, call it direction. We're not actually going to use direction for any of our animation here, but these are just the basic variables that I like to create when I first create an animation blueprint. We are now going to get our character movement, and off of character movement we can find is falling. Promote that to a variable, call it is falling. This is just a built-in function in the character movement that tells us when the character is in the air. So this boolean is set as true when our character is not touching the ground. We can also grab off of character movement and get current acceleration, and we're going to check if that is not equal to 0, not equal, and an AND boolean, and if our ground speed is also greater than 3, then this is going to trigger a boolean, so promote to variable and call this should move question mark. So this one is just checking that our acceleration is not 0 and our ground speed is greater than some small number. Should we transition from an idle animation to, say, a walk or a run animation? This is a good one to have. So this is the event graph all set up. This is everything we need here. We can head on over to the Anim Graph, and what we're going to do here is just right click up in some empty space up here and find state machine. We're going to call this state machine locomotion. Whoops, locomotion. Just going to copy that so I don't type it again, because we're going to drag off of here and add new saved cached pose. I'm going to click on that and rename it locomotion. Going to go into this state machine locomotion, and off of entry I'm going to add a state, call it idle. I can open up idle, and in here I'm going to grab my idle animation, plug it into the output here, and with idle selected I'm going to make sure I check loop animation. I'm going to back out to locomotion now and drag off of idle and add another state, call it walk/run. And actually we need to create a blend space for walk/run, so what we're going to do is go to our animations folder here and right click, and in animation and legacy find blend space 1D. Select your character skeleton. I'm going to call this BS_walk_run. Open this up, and over here on the left I'm going to drop down this horizontal axes menu here and change the name to speed, and I'm going to make the maximum axis value 500 because that's our character's max walk speed. I am going to grab my walking animation and drop it on the graph here and move it all the way to the left. I am going to grab my running animation and drag it all the way to the right here, and save this and close this. That's all we need to do in there, because in walk run we're going to drop that blend space in here, plug it in, and plug in our ground speed to the speed here. I back out to locomotion, I also need some transition rules to allow my character to transition from the idle state to the walk run state. And all we're going to use to transition into the walk run state is this should move variable that we created. So I can just plug that in there. And then this transition from walk run back to idle is going to be should not move. So grab should move and a not boolean. Plug this in here. And that's all we need to do in here. We can back out to the Anim Graph, and what we're going to do now is create another state machine down here, state machine, and we're going to call it main states. And between main states and the output pose, we're also going to grab a slot, default slot. This is just the default slot that any animation montages will be overlaid onto the output pose. So you're probably going to want one of these in the future. We're going to enter into main states here, and off of entry, we're going to add a state, call it locomotion. And in locomotion, we are just going to pull up this cached pose that we made, locomotion. So in case there's a bit of confusion here, when we created this saved cached pose, we cached locomotion into this save. So we basically saved this output pose here, and then in main states and locomotion, we've grabbed that saved cached pose, and that's outputting there. So that's why saving locomotion is a bit handy. Oh, I've misspelt that, missed an O. We are now going to do our jumping, falling, and landing animations. And we're going to use something called a state alias to do this. So up here in the empty space here, I'm going to add a state alias, and I'm going to call it to_jump/falling. I'm going to also create one down here called to_landing. Between to_landing and locomotion, I'm just going to add a state called land. This is going to be a bit confusing, but I'll try to talk you through it once I've added these states. And land is going to connect onto locomotion. To_jump_falling is going to add a state up here called jump, and another one over here, add state called falling, and jump into falling. So what these state aliases are just a cleaner way of doing these graphs. So instead of connecting locomotion to jump and to falling, and land to jump and falling, I am just going to select to_jump_falling, and over here in the details panel, I'm going to check locomotion and land. So when these transitional rules are satisfied and our character's in the locomotion or the land state, it will be able to transition into the jump or falling state. With to_landing, we want to be able to transition into land from either jump or falling. So if our character is jumping or falling, and then they touch the ground, they're able to transition into land. If they've just landed or they're walking around and then they jump, they're able to transition into jump or falling. So let's start just by adding the animations into these states. So if we go into jump, we can grab our jump animation, plug that in here, back out and go to falling, and grab our fall idle and plug it in here. Now this one is meant to loop in case you're falling. So with this selected, check loop animation over here. You can back out and land. Remember, we made land an additive. So what we're going to do is right click up here and get our locomotion and then we are going to apply an additive, and the additive is going to be our landing animation. Plug this into the output pose here, and now all our animations are inserted here. We just need to do the transitional rules. So this is a bit tricky. If we're transitioning into a jump, so we can go into this transitional rule here, transition into jump, we want to get is falling and an and boolean, and the other condition to go into jump is our velocity in the vertical axis. So if we get velocity and then we right click here and go split struct pin, we've got velocity z, which is our vertical velocity up and down. We can check if that is greater than 100, because when you jump, it basically changes the velocity of the character in the vertical to 700 or whatever you've got it set to. So when you hit jump, instantly it's got a vertical velocity of 700. It'll start slowing down with gravity, but at the start it'll be instantly 700. So if we're falling and our velocity on the z-axis is greater than 100, we can transition into the jump state. The other thing about this transitional rule is that it's going to have priority over the transition to falling. So we need to keep the priority order here as 1, and then select the transition to falling and change the priority order to 2. Okay, and in to falling over to fall, we just want is falling, so you can just grab is falling and put it on there. Jump to falling is going to be an automatic transition, so once the jump animation is completed, we want it to transition into the falling state. So just single click on this transition, and you want to check this automatic rule based on sequence player in state. Automatic rule basically just means once this animation is completed, it can automatically transition into falling. So that's all these transition rules and animation setup. The next thing is to landing. And to land, we just want to be not falling anymore. So we can grab is falling and a not boolean. Plug that in there. That's all we need to do there. And then once the landing animation is completed, we want to automatically transition into locomotion. So we can select this one and check automatic rule. And that is the animation blueprint all set up. That's all we're going to do in here. So we can save, compile and save and close that. Now in BP third person character, what we're going to do is select the mesh, and we're going to change it to our characters mesh. So find your characters mesh, and in the anim class here, we're going to change the animation blueprint to the animation blueprint that we've created. So straight away you can see that he's animated there. Compile and save, and if I hit play, you can see that he's floating above the ground. If this is anything like my other character, you're going to want to change grid snapping to 5 and just drop him down by 5 centimeters. If I hit play now, he should be feet firmly on the ground, and he's able to run around and jump. And it's a bit silly with the blending into the it's blending into running or walking. What we might do is just change that landing animation. So where is it? Landing. And I'm going to change the selected animation to the idle animation. If I can find it here. Idle. Let's see how that works. It's still being a bit funky. Might try mesh space here. So change this to mesh space. That's definitely not right. uh, I'm going to change this back to local space, and in the animation blueprint I'm going to find my land, and I'm going to change this alpha to 0.5, and I'm also going to change that selected animation back to the walking animation. Yeah, that's a bit better. He's kind of landing. He's kind of landing into a walk. If you're standing still, it's yeah. So these animations are not perfectly set up to be additive. That's for a different tutorial. This one is just to get you guys switching the character out and setting up an animation blueprint. And while we're here, I'm just going to very quickly, in a very quick and hacky kind of way, set up walking. So I'm going to select my character movement here, and I'm going to change the max walk speed to 100. I believe in my blend space I set the maximum of 500. I did. So I've set the walk speed of my character to 100, and now I'm going to find left shift, and I'm going to grab my character movement, and off of character movement I'm going to set max walk speed. Duplicate this, and on pressed I'm going to set my walk speed to 500, and on released I'm going to drop it back to 100. So now my character can walk, so I can check out the walking animation. Oh, it's a little bit because the walking animation is actually set to 0 in the blend space. If I open the blend space, I can click on my walking animation and set this speed to 100, and then I might just grab my idle and put my idle in here at 0. Save that. Now when I walk, he's actually doing the walking animation instead of some weird blend between the walk and the run. And I can press left shift and run. That's it, guys. We've set up a custom character from Mixamo, downloaded some animations, and set up an animation blueprint from scratch. We've got walking, running, idle, and jumping, falling, and landing animations. Just to give you guys a start, set you on your way. There's much, much, much more to be learnt, but I think this is a good place to start once you've done a beginner's tutorial, to start messing around, implementing different characters, switch it up from the mannequin. So if this tutorial has been of any use or value to you whatsoever, please hit like and subscribe, and I will see you on the next one.